Hello and welcome to Read Brave, a comics podcast from the Graphmania Podcast Network. I'm Vinton Bain.
I'm Cory Casto.
He did not talk like that when he was testing the levels on your mic.
You guys said I needed more excitement, so I was trying to just punch it up a little bit.
Punch it. You know what?
Keep it there.
Keep it there. Keep it there.
All right. I didn't read any comics.
I like this radio personality that you just came up with. Should I come up with some sound effects?
I'm fairly close to the front door. I could just walk out right now.
So, comics. Did we read them? I know Cory did.
Yeah.
I binge read today. That's what I do every 2 weeks. I go, oh crap, we're recording tonight. I better read something. And then I ignore my children all day and I read.
See how this podcast has advanced your life by forcing you to read more comics?
It depends on your definition of advanced. What, you mean steal a day of my life? Yeah. No, I just need to be better about time management. I'm awful at time management.
Me too.
I'm so bad at it.
Scott, what did you read?
Probably the same stuff you guys did.
We'll see.
I'm gonna let you guys handle Doom Patrol though, and I'll interject here and there. But
I wasn't gonna mention Doom Patrol.
You're such a liar.
I wasn't gonna mention it because I liked it so much, and because I've talked about it so much. I felt like the thousands of listeners we have aren't tuning in to hear me talk about Doom Patrol.
Are they? Maybe
yeah,
they probably are.
But I feel like you should talk about this issue because important things did happen in this issue. And while I enjoy Doom Patrol, I feel like it's more like your thing. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It's your thing.
Okay.
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 Okie dokie.
So let me tell you about Doom Patrol.
Okay. So I finally did read America #1.
What did you think?
So I thought it was awesome. My favorite quote, which I'm going to start interjecting into my daily, maybe not daily, that might be overkill, but my life is, what in the holy menstruation are you doing here? So I'm going to start using holy menstruation as a curse.
Is that what
because it is a curse.
Yeah.
So, no, it's not a curse, except it is. But I did write where she says, doing the work means taking inventory. I can't read my own handwriting. Doing the work means taking inventory. Stare everyday decisions you've made in the face and own each one. You are powerful enough to evolve. That's where the magic is, and that's where you find your light. It will be bright and endless. I cannot be destroyed. It is infinite. It is you. It cannot be destroyed. God, I have really got to do better about writing this. It's like I was rushing because the kids kept interrupting me, and it was like literal chicken scratch. But anyway, yeah, that was a nice quote. So, if you read if you read the issue and you go, oh, this is what she was talking about, it makes sense when I read it myself, and she doesn't read it all weird. So, yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Gamora #4. Gamora continues to be really solid. I like the idea of a flawed, quote unquote, superhero. This issue dealt a lot with her need to have something to hate, to have that drive for revenge, and a really dark side to her, which I think has always been there, but it's nice to see that happening more. Gives an extra layer and more substance, I think, to her character for me. The Few #3, there was a moment when Eden was nursing the baby that she found that I thought was really cool, talking about how in war times it's happened before, that babies that become motherless, women taking care of them, their bodies kind of just take over and start nourishing the baby. So I thought it was really cool that they talked about that. And like I said, I was going to leave Doom Patrol for you guys, but Coady and the Creepies #1.
Yeah.
I think we all read it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I liked it a lot.
I did too. One of my favorite things about it were the band t-shirts.
Yeah.
Someone was wearing a Shang-a-Lang shirt, which is a band that gets featured a lot on Nothing Nice to Say, which is the creator of Nothing Nice to Say is Mitch Klim, and his wife is Nation of Amanda, who did all the artwork.
Oh, so a little nod there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Connection.
And then the Daniel Johnson T-shirt.
Yeah. I did recognize that one. I didn't recognize any other ones
Yeah.
because I'm not the punk aficionado that you guys are. Cory and I met kind of through a love of punk, but then I betrayed him and started listening to like Ben Folds and
The love
boring
of punk for you
things
is just a facade.
as I got older. No, I really did love it, but you
You moved on.
well,
You
yeah.
grew up, and some of us did.
That's not what I was trying to say, but
Some of us are just
I think that,
stuck
like,
being
is-
a dumb teenager.
my everyday life is hectic enough. I think that when I listen to music, I usually want something more chill. Like, I don't really like to be screamed at. But, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have its own value anymore or a place in my past, my history, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So,
I'm really
There you
glad
go.
that we got the song to go along with the
Yeah.
panels of them singing, because it was just going through my head the whole time, and it made it really enjoyable.
Yeah, me too.
Vinton, your turn.
So I read some comics. I didn't read any of the comics you read except for Coady and the Creepies and America, but you knew I read that already.
Yeah.
Doom Patrol.
High five.
Well, yeah. I've been sick for like a whole week straight, really bad, and in that time I instead caught up with Batman because I was like, hey, I'm just laying here, I can just read through all of this. So I caught up with the new Batman that's being done by Tom King, and we already talked about some of it on the podcast with Brian, so I won't go into too much detail, but I am enjoying it. It's not the Vision, and if I had gone in expecting it to be anything like that, I think Cory warned me that it wouldn't be, so that helped. But if I had gone in there, I would have been probably sorely disappointed because it's not at all the same. But it is interesting to see a different take on what Tom King does, having only really known him from the Vision series. And I always love Batman. He has a special place in my heart, and there are some really cool epic stories being told. And I am glad to now be current on Batman, and I'm going to try to stay current so I can talk about Batman on a regular basis, because I've always described myself as a Marvel fan who loves Batman, and Batman is the most Marvel of the DC characters. I also am trying to catch up on Nightwing because I've heard Nightwing's really good, and the first arc of Nightwing was pretty good, and then there was this crossover event that happened with Detective Comics Batman and Nightwing where they had giant monsters come and attack, and I was like, am I reading Monsters Unleashed? What is happening? So timing is everything. I didn't enjoy that series, probably just because it seemed a lot like Monsters Unleashed, and I was like, why am I reading this from both companies right now? On the Marvel side of things, I read Amazing Spider-Man 25, which was an extra large 40-page main story, and then a bunch of bonus stories, some interesting things, a few good things, like I think they call her Spider May. It's Aunt May Spider-Man, which is a pretty fun little comic. But the main story was good, and I always like more Bobby Morse in my comics. So anytime she shows up, it's a good thing. But the most of the other stuff I didn't really care too much for. And then they had a stupid Tsum Tsum comic. Are you guys familiar with these Tsum Tsum toys?
Yes.
Yeah, our kids have thousands.
I understand like marketing and having cool toys. I don't necessarily want to read comics about them. So they had a whole story
I mean,
in there, and I
it's
was
obviously just a marketing ploy
Yeah.
to try and make money is all
So-
it is.
So yeah, that was what it was. I read the next issue of Ghost Rider, and I wasn't sure I was going to keep reading it. It's barely a Ghost Rider story. They are kind of bringing Ghost Rider more into it, and I do really like the side characters that they have going on. Silk and Totally Awesome Hulk, and of course Laura Kinney's Wolverine, and now Coulson and May are there. But you can't have a series that's solely based on side characters and nothing else. I mean, that's a team-up story and shouldn't be called Ghost Rider. But I did hear that apparently this title has been canceled. So
Interesting.
I'm not going to have to worry about whether I'm going to keep going with it or not, because it's not going to keep going with me. I read the next issue of Occupy Avengers, and it was a really fun story about LMDs, life model decoys, and it had a lot of fun things in it. If you're not reading Occupy Avengers, it's one that I recommend at the moment. I continued Spider-Man 14, the Miles Morales, where he is traipsing around dimension hopping with Gwen. And there's one, they're not the same age. And at that age, that's dangerous. I'm pretty sure she's over 18 and he's like 15.
That's a
And
little
they're
awkward.
kissing and stuff. And I'm like, guys, that's okay. But I am still loving the two of them being together, but the whole series that they're doing with that is seeming really dragged out and unnecessarily. So I'm like, get somewhere with it. Finish the story, wrap it up, move on to the next one. They can continue to be having adventures. Just have them have another adventure.
Yeah.
And I read Great Lakes Avengers #6. Did either of you read that?
I'm behind on that.
That one was
It's
fun. It's continues to be fun, just as fun as it has been. Nothing new and exciting, but still delightful. Read the next 2 issues of Miss Marvel because apparently I fell behind. I realized I had 2 issues to read, and I was like, wait. It's pretty interesting. She's still dealing with the internet troll hacker, but she's finding out it might be something more than that, and it has more powers and can control people, perhaps. Miss Marvel, as always, is good and fun. Yeah, don't have too much to say there. Cave Carson, I think I have decided to stop reading. It's not bad. It's just not for me, and the story is not going anywhere fast enough to keep my interest. So the last issue it wasn't bad at all. I just think that will be my exit point for it. Next issue of God Country was amazing, though. Did either of you read that? Oh man, God Country is so cool. I really like it a lot. It's just the pacing is so perfect in it, and the art is wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, I need to check it out. Everyone's talking about it, and I haven't read any of it.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's just too much.
There is.
There's a lot to read.
I tried a new comic, Grass Kings by Matt Kent and Tyler Jenkins, and this comic is a lot of fun. It's really engrossing. The art is wonderful. I really like it. It reminds me of kind of like Jeff Lemire. Very similar to that anyways. And the story is just really, really interesting, and it's going to be pulling me in for a while. It kind of had a backwoods Justified feeling to it. So I finally read Slam 4, and I was really glad, like you had mentioned, Scout, about them telling about how Derby works. I thought
Yeah,
they did a
that
really
was
good
my
job of
favorite
doing
part of that issue was explaining Derby. And I love the idea of young girls reading that comic and being interested in it and maybe trying it out.
Yeah, and I really like that they're telling a bit of a redemption story now, and so those always get me.
Yeah.
I read the next issue of Super Sons and enjoyed that a lot.
Now I know you really didn't like the first issue, so it's surprising that you like the second issue.
I think you have the script flipped, my good sir. I still am really liking it. I love this pairing of this Superboy and Damian Wayne. It's a really good back and forth. I think I mentioned before, just the idea of having Superman and Batman out on those adventures, but this is a child version of both of them pretty much. So you have the Boy Scout and the Troublemaker. And then I read Doom Patrol, and that's it. So we'll go to Cory so we can talk about Doom Patrol.
I waited very patiently for this issue.
That's a lie.
I waited very impatiently for this episode of Doom Patrol, and I kind of had some temper tantrums in private, waiting for it to come out. But it came out.
Private is in quotes.
In the middle of the comic book store.
There was some sarcasm.
I can't go back to that comic book store anymore, but
legally.
But anyway, it was well worth the wait. It was an amazing story. I felt like, okay, so there's this series on Netflix called The OA, and if you haven't watched it yet, then you're going to get a spoiler, and it's your fault for not watching it because it's a great show. But the whole episode is like all the stuff's going on.
The whole series?
No.
Oh, you're talking about the first episode.
The first episode, all the stuff's going on. You're finding out information. Everything's getting set up. Mm-hmm. And then the last 3 minutes, maybe even the last minute of the show, it like the title card comes up and
Yeah.
you realize you just watched the introduction.
Yeah.
You didn't watch an episode.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind was blown. And that's how I felt about this issue of Doom Patrol.
I would
Yeah.
agree with that.
This is issue 1. We got the backstory.
I agree.
Now we're moving forward.
I agree. Yeah.
You know, Larry Traynor merged again with the negative space man or whatever, the negative man. And he's back in the bandages, and like the cat eye sunglasses were perfect.
Yes, I love that panel. Like, we
He
posted
was
it
just
on
like,
our
cool.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Cool. It was
And
great.
we saw Cliff Steele kicking butt
Yeah.
and
And get his butt kicked.
yeah,
It wouldn't be
Well,
a Doom Patrol story without him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
and mentioning that he's just a brain in a bucket of metal.
Mm-hmm.
And then Casey, I felt like she really came into her own and like proved herself to be a vital member of the team.
Super vital.
And then the icy, like the
last
cherry-
2 pages.
Yeah, the last 2 pages were the absolute best of the whole run I've read so far.
I agree.
I have not been so excited for a comic, whatever,
Yeah.
since I read those 2
So much
pages.
so we were laying in bed last night when he was reading it and I was half asleep and he was like, you have to read this. And I said, I want to wait until tomorrow when I'm more awake because otherwise I won't remember it. He was like, no, you have to read these 2 pages. Just read these 2 pages. So it was exciting.
I'm a little bit ridiculous on how like emotional I get about everything. But I
You
kind
just
of
feel
felt
things.
I've really felt the last 2 pages of that comic a lot. Like,
Yeah.
I was
I
very
felt,
overwhelmed.
I felt a moment with Casey and I chicken scratched it, but I won't put you through that. I actually looked up our digital copy so I could read it to you. But Casey says at one point, she says, the world is hard and unforgiving. It can change you because we're made up of all the things that happen to us. The good things fill your heart, but the bad things and what we choose to do with them really makes us who we are. I'll keep choosing love. So she's a very bright light in this comic. And I love that he has created her and put her in here because I feel like it's going to be, because Doom Patrol, while, you know, Grant Morrison's runs had its issues here and there that were light and funny, overall it was really dark.
And pretty heavy.
So I feel like him using her as kind of a point of light
Yeah.
and something there to be the moral compass of a sorts is
Yeah.
really smart.
I also read issue 1 of One Foot in the Grave. It's a new IDW title. And it's kind of like a cross between Quantum Leap, iZombie, and The Thin Man.
Interesting.
And it's about this guy who's a detective and he's like kind of led this seedy life and made some bad choices and he dies. He gets stabbed by a gangster and he's about to die, and then this like angel comes and makes a deal with him that if he like can take care of this and this and this and this and this, then he can be like granted into heaven or whatever, you know. And so it reminded me a lot of The Thin Man, and it was funny because it reminded me of this movie called Here Comes Mr. Jordan, this like old movie from the 30s, and then like the essay in the back was about the Thin Man in that movie, Here Comes Mr. Jordan.
That's funny.
And so I really enjoyed it. It was a good comic. I'm just kidding. I made all that up. That comic doesn't exist.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm serious. I made that up. I read a comic called Helena Crash.
Is this real?
Is this real life? Okay, I honestly read this comic called Helena Crash, and it is written by the author, the writer of Space Riders, Fabian Rangel Jr., I think is how you pronounce his name. And it's about this like kind of BA woman, kind of like a tank girl type person who will it's set in the future, and the environment has been so run down that coffee is basically heroin. Like everyone wants coffee, everyone like needs coffee, but it's illegal because it's so difficult to grow, and like the environment's been so run down that it's so fragile it can't even sustain like a coffee plant growing. So her job is to
Truly dark times.
Yeah. So her job is to like get coffee and like smuggle it to these people and get paid for it and stuff. And there's lots of car chases, and it was just a really fun comic. The illustrator was Warwick Johnson Caldwell. And
You're just pulling these names out of the air, so it's hard for me to believe that any of this is true.
That name sounds like just bizarre enough and just real enough to be a real name, doesn't it?
I feel like I should be fact checking you.
Maybe this is fake comic news.
Alternative facts.
The Onion version.
I really liked his artwork a lot. It reminded me a lot of like a really independent style of comic, like something that would be in like Drawn and Quarterly or Fantagraphics. So I really like that one a lot. Those are the 3 comics I wanted to talk about: One Foot in the Grave, Doom Patrol, and
Your Made Up Pretend.
Boxing Helena. No, Helena Crash.
That's a good name though.
Helena Crash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Is
you
that the
listeners
one
out
that
there
wasn't
can have
real?
idea for
No,
free.
the one that was not real was One Foot in the
You
Grave.
see how
One
close
Foot in
I'm
the Grave.
paying attention. See, once you start lying,
Everything is a lie.
my brain goes, it
I was just willing
screeches to a
believe
halt.
that was the one you made up. I was like, I knew you made up one of them. Whichever one it was.
I feel like I should mention you asked Vinton and I to read Magdalena issue 1, and that's apparently a reboot from
A 90s
1998.
comic. Yeah.
It was really interesting. I'm definitely a sucker for a chosen girl story in the vein of Buffy, which it was really similar to, but with a more religious twist.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea is that the Magdalena, defends the world from demonic evil, and her weapon is
Spear with
the spear with
Christ's blood
Christ's blood on
on it.
it. And she herself is empowered by the blood of Christ that runs in her veins.
The power of Christ compels her.
Yes.
One
So,
might say.
it was really interesting. I think that it's not, I usually don't read things with overt religious
Overtones.
overtones. Yeah, I was going to say undertones, but I was like, that's not the right term at all. Overtones. But it was interesting. I could see myself checking out more of it.
It was not something that I would have recommended. I mean, I would not have
Normally read it.
I wouldn't
Mhm.
even given it a chance. It's not, like you said, don't normally read religious comics. And I don't really like that kind of like fantasy comics either. But I don't even remember why I started reading it, but I did. And I think just because issue 1 came out this last Wednesday, and I wanted to read something that was the first issue.
Yeah.
And I liked it. I mean, I was kind of surprised that I liked it.
Yeah, when you had me read it, I started reading it and was like, this looks super 90s. This just feels super 90s to me. And you were like, oh, it's a reboot of a 90s. I was like, well, this makes sense. And then I kept seeing the darkness from another Top Cow comic pop up as a little figurine or a toy on the couch. And I was like, hey, okay, this is feeling very, very 90s and for a reason. But then I was like, in the 90s, though, I bet you she had a metal bikini of sorts. And we looked it up. She did.
He
Nailed
called it.
It's funny that you knew that was the darkness, because I'll admit I thought it was Winter Soldier.
Oh, I could see that. Yeah. Who wore it better?
Bucky, always.
I thought of one more comic that I wanted to mention that I had read. It was called Under Winter.
Is this a real one?
It's a real one. It's written by Ray Fox, who also wrote Gotham by Midnight. Have either one of you read Gotham by Midnight before? It's kind of like a horror comic set in Gotham. Under Winter was a horror comic, and it's about a chamber quartet who plays for this really weird party. It's very odd, and it's very not for children, but I really liked Gotham by Midnight, so I was interested to read this one. And the variant cover is illustrated by Jeff Lemire.
Does Michael Scarn appear in Gotham by Midnight?
He does, yeah.
Okay.
Only when the threat level is midnight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Golden
think
Faces.
Brian
Yeah.
recommended that to me because he pointed out there was a Jeff Lemire variant cover, so that must have been it.
Yeah.
So that takes us to our segment for today's show. Today we are talking with one of our favorite creators, Farel Dalrymple. I hope you enjoy. Well, we're here with Farel Dalrymple, the comic book artist and author. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm trying to get stuff done. Aaron's taken care of and things.
And we're interrupting your day.
Thank you for taking
No,
time
it's
to.
great.
Yeah, thanks for sitting down with us.
Oh yeah, thanks.
So the first thing we wanted to ask you about was the variant cover that you designed for Doom Patrol that was just released this week. Can you tell us about how that came to be and if you were previously a fan of Doom Patrol?
No, I mean I've never really read I haven't read a lot of DC comics like growing up or whatever. But I always liked the images that I saw from it.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of the creators that have done work for it. I guess how it came about was that Jamie Rich just, I guess, knew me from being in Portland and stuff, and then contacted me about doing a cover. I don't know if it was his idea or Gerard Way's idea. I went to art school with Gerard Way.
Oh, wow.
I think he was like, "Oh, hey, I like your work," and ask that guy to do it, do one.
That's
Because
awesome.
he seemed like he was getting a bunch of different like alternative or like indie artists to do. Like I know like Brian Chippendale did one.
Yeah.
Which was pretty crazy looking.
Yeah.
Sort of, if I remember correctly, it was just kind of like a pattern of like sort of a collage pattern.
Yeah, I think that Brian Chippendale is the one person I would never expect for a variant cover for DC.
Yeah, it did seem a little sort of outside the normal whatever look that most of them had, That's kind of interesting because I feel like most people that are kind of like independent comic book artists, like Nate Powell and people like that. It seems that they've kind of come from that background of, growing up reading Marvel comics and things. And I don't know, maybe Brian Chippendale did as well, but his stuff is so I don't know, it seems so like removed from whatever the normal influences on a cartoonist are.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, I love his work too. If and Oof was amazing. Love that book.
So you've been publishing a sequel to Pop Gun War and the monthly comic Island, and it will be collected and released this June as a trade paperback. Did you write and illustrate the story all at once, or did you complete sections at a time as needed for Island?
Most of the book I did over like the last year or so. There was like the first maybe less than 50 pages. I don't remember exactly where I stopped. It was like I'd started the book, actually started working on pages for that like over 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So like when I finished the first Pop Gun War came out from Dark Horse, Dinah Schutz was like, "Hey, do you want to do another one?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do," because I was going to do one anyway, and I had it all written out and everything. I was super excited to work on it, but I wasn't really dealing with sort of the reality of like, oh, the amount of work I want to put into this is going to be more than I'd be able to do without getting paid for it.
Yeah.
So I was just sort of chipping away at like a page every couple of weeks or whatever, months. And at some point I just kind of had to put it on the shelf and not work on it. And then I started I did a few more pages after I moved to Portland, when I first moved to Portland, because Jason Levian, who runs Floating World Comics, approached me about putting out a couple of like limited edition, like zine style letterpress cover versions of what I had done on it so far.
That's really cool.
He was running on it on Arthur Magazine's website as well. And then I just I think when I started working on the Wrenchies, that just sort of took over my life, where I put this book away. And then Brandon Graham mentioned doing Island. He was doing Island and he wanted me to do something for it. And he's like, "Well, I like your Pop Gun War stuff, feels like the most you, and I want everyone's work in this book to be the most their work that it can be." So I was like, "Well, can I just run it in there, run the sequel in there? And he was like, yeah. So, and I think it was just nice timing because the book had been out of print for a little while. The original Popcorn War Gift had been out of print for a little while at Dark Horse. So it seemed like a good idea to like kind of move all that over to Image, since I was doing the sequel with Image. And
Yeah.
my editor wasn't even working at Dark Horse anymore either. So it just seemed kind of like, oh, okay, I'll just do this at Image. I'll be like an Image person. I really like, I don't know, I like the company, and I like what Brandon's been doing over there, and I guess what a lot of the sort of like mainstream type creators are doing now. Where it's like, oh, I just kind of how it sort of started, I guess. Where it's like, oh, we're people like our us for our like ideas and art and stories or whatever, so let's all take that right to the public and not deal with sort of these like big conglomerates making decisions.
Right. Yeah. Well, it definitely seems like your work is a good fit for Image. How has contributing pieces? I know that you said that you had it mostly completed, but how do you feel like contributing pieces of a story to a monthly comic differ from releasing it all at one time?
Well, actually, I didn't. When I started doing it for Island, I had just had maybe like 50 pages done.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of, and I did it all maybe like in the last year or so, like finished it up. Like I just finished the last page. It was just like a few months ago.
Oh,
wow. Seems like longer ago than that, but I think it was just like at the beginning of the year is when I finished. So I don't even remember what your question was. I'm sorry.
That's okay. How do you feel like contributing to a monthly title differs from releasing your work like the Wrenchies, like one story all at one time?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I like it so much better, like being a part of an anthology or serializing my work somehow.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether if it's just putting pages on the internet or I liked the idea of Island was having this like monthly book come out, but like none of the contributors really had to produce a monthly
right. Yeah.
book. So it was still kind of like bigger chunks. Like I think the first, the first set of pages was like 50 pages or something like that. And I think the book Island kind of fluctuated in page count from issue to issue as well. But I don't know, working on the Wrenchies was really hard. I mean, not hard as working like at a coffee shop was or something like that, but like it was hard in the sense of like no one's seeing this work. I'm just doing this all day every day, working on something that no one's can really look at.
Sure.
So it's nice. It was nice, releasing that so I could just for myself, even just so I could see it in print. I didn't really get like a bunch of feedback from people as the issues were coming out. I mean, there was like a few people on Twitter and stuff like that were like, "Oh, cool, new Island issue," but it was kind of remarkable to me how little people were talking about it
yeah.
when it was out, or even like telling me like, "Hey, I saw your comic in there." Like I would get people like other cartoonists and stuff that like worked in comic stores or just worked at Image or something would be like, "Oh, what are you working on right now?" "Oh, I'm doing this comic for Island," like, "Oh, I haven't been reading that," It's like, "Oh, okay." But I'm not mad about it or anything, but it was still like better just for me just to have this thing come out that I could look at the pages and print and and talk to the other people that were doing stuff for Island, like talk to Brandon about his work in there. And
yeah.
So I prefer that, I guess. It's sort of like doing like a web comic or something where I think people kind of get excited about it at first, and then you just might not hear anything about it, but like you're sort of having this thing kind of keeping you accountable to produce pages rather than just like this overwhelming thing of like, oh, I have 200 pages to go, I'll never get this done. It's kind of nice to have like, okay, I have to do my next set of 30 pages for for this anthology, or I have to put my weekly page up or whatever.
Yeah.
I tried to get halfway through the Wrenchies, I tried to like renegotiate my I mean, not seriously renegotiate it, but like I talked to the book agent I had for for the for the Wrenchies. And I was like, hey, can I get like maybe, switch this to where I turn in a certain number of pages and I get like part of my advance from just doing this certain number of pages. Not even like it was like a lot of money, but it was just, something like having like a reward or something.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
And I got a lecture that that's not the way that works. So
That's unfortunate.
just suck it up and try to finish this thing, as best as I could.
So you've worked with Brandon Graham on Prophet and Island, and I think that both your styles work really well together. When and how did you start working with Brandon?
We met at an internet flash animation company, or they were like one of those like .com companies. I think it was like 2000. I want to say either late 99 or 2000. But yeah, it was this place called Urban Box Office, and yeah, it was. He just showed up in my like office. I just was like doing storyboards and stuff that were basically just being scanned in and like converted into Flash, and like move, all the parts would move around and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what exactly that company, like their business model was supposed to be, because like, yeah, I didn't know how they're gonna generate any money or anything like that.
Yeah.
But he would just kind of show up in my office and like start talking to me, just like, oh hey, you do a comic? Yeah, you're the only real cartoonist I've met since moving to New York.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, really? Because I went to SVA, and I think like at that same company, like Becky Cloonan started working there.
Oh wow.
And yeah, there was a bunch of like friends I had from SVA and stuff that worked there. But I think Brandon had immigrated from Seattle, and at the time he was telling me he was sleeping in a stairwell because he didn't get along with his roommates.
Yikes.
Yeah, so he was like this, I don't know, he seemed really kind of like I guess not like a punk rocker in the typical sense of the word, but like the words, but I don't know, he just kind of had this sort of like vibe to him, like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like do graffiti in places, and
That's awesome.
I don't know, I wouldn't call him like a dumpster diver or anything like that, but
yeah.
I don't know, I got along pretty well with him, but yeah, I don't know, he just kind of showed up, and I think I had already done like a couple issues of Meat House, and I asked him to do stuff for Meat House, so
that's cool.
He just was pretty involved in that anthology. So, well, someone's sawing right now.
These things happen. So I know that you went to school for cartooning. When did it become drawing comics and writing comics? When did that become more than a hobby for you? Something more than something you just enjoyed doing, but you thought, hey, I can actually make a career out of this?
I don't know. I guess I kind of, like, when did it actually happen?
Yeah.
I would say probably around then, when like, I don't know. It's kind of hard to, I guess, put in different compartments, but like, I worked at like a coffee shop and bars and art supply stores and stuff after college, but like, I don't know, I think like it wasn't too much longer where I just started working like full time for myself, like doing illustration or comic book type work, but actually like doing my own comics where I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna draw like, do like a work for hire type situation where it's just like I get to write and draw my own story ideas and own my own characters. I feel like that kind of wasn't until like just like a few years ago,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it seems that like I do like illustration work, or like, oh, I'm gonna help paint this mural or something, or do like a commission of like drawing Doctor Strange or something like that for someone. Like, is that working on comics? I don't know. Is that, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it just seems like I'm just like this commercial artist person that like I just a few years ago I was like, oh, I have to like figure out how to steer my career so that I'm not like an old man even though I'm getting close there, but like not an old man that's just like, now I'm gonna draw this issue of like Wonder Woman or something,
Yeah.
Like, it just, I mean, nothing is wrong with people doing that. That's like a noble profession, but I think it would just kind of drive me crazy not being able to like illustrate my own story ideas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Speaking of that, what draws you to your creative work, to creating comics? Is it therapeutic for you? Is it about connecting with your fans or other creators, or is it just an urge inside of you that you have to draw and write, and so it's just kind of letting that out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably the latter, that it's just like I almost feel like it's like I have the sort of like a compulsion or addiction or something
Yeah.
to making comics. Like, I'm not, I mean, part of me, like, we all like approval, so like I really like people having read my work and talking to me about it, I guess. And like, I mean, that's really, it's flattering and feels good. But if that was like anything remotely like what drove, that's nothing like what drives me to actually making the work.
Sure.
Like, I don't get that enough for it to like, I don't know. I mean, it has value to me, but it's not like, I think I would do it anyway. It's like, I just have this, I must just feel, it's just some kind of weird just drive to make it, regardless of whether or not like, I mean, I have a lot of doubts about my work all the time. I'm sure like everyone sort of struggles with, is this worthwhile or whatever. But I guess just whatever that compulsion thing is, this keeps me kind of moving forward anyway. In spite of, sort of, informs my work in the sense of like, I want to refine it and get better at it, but it's not something that like, I just, I don't let, people's criticism and stuff like that necessarily like affect me doing what I do,
Yeah.
Or my own criticism, really. It's just like, well, I'm going to do this anyway, even though I think it probably sucks, but whatever.
Okay, when we first met you, you told us that when you were making the Wrenchies, you were influenced by the 1979 film Over the Hedge.
Oh, yeah.
Over the edge, not over the hedge.
No, not Over the Hedge. No, Over the Edge. You're right. Different movie. Would you be interested in adapting a film into a graphic novel? And if so, what film would you want to adapt?
A film into a graphic novel?
Yeah.
Okay. Sheesh.
Is there like a film that you feel has touched you so deeply that, that you would love to be able to, put your own art and your own, I don't know, essence or whatever into that story?
I mean, I feel like I kind of did that. Like, maybe not, okay, I'm taking this one particular movie and turning it into a comic book, but I feel like all my work, especially, specifically the Wrenchies, was like, that movie as a comic, but also like a bunch of other movies.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and other, music and other sources of inspiration, but I don't think I could like pick like one thing of like, oh, I want to, I love this thing so much, I want to turn it into another thing that's like it, but not as, it doesn't move around.
Yeah.
It's even weird to me when people want to adapt comic books into movies.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't understand it. Like, I like the thing as it is. I mean, I might like rewrite movies or TV shows, or like, well, why did they do that? They should have done this, or why did they end it here? It would have been so much better like this.
Yeah.
But like, as far as like taking something that I love and like making it and turning it into another form of media, it just seems to sort of like, I don't know, kind of water it down or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just like this person, had this vision for this thing, or this group of people had this like synthesis of ideas or whatever, that kind of was greater than the sum of its parts. It like became, like I think like the best, like truest, vision is usually put on paper or on film or whatever when it's more like an auteur doing it, just because
Okay.
I feel like there's like a clarity there or something, you know, like, oh, I know exactly what I want, and I'm going to try to get this to look this specific way, you know. But I think that, you know, when you have a movie, I mean, that's practically impossible just to have one person doing everything. But like a comic book, you know, when you have like a writer, artist, colorist, letterer, and all that stuff, it's harder, and I think harder to get like that purity or clarity when the more people you have involved in something. And it's kind of like, I don't know, a testament to like a creative team when they can make this thing that is like kind of transcends like, oh, this is like an assembly line working on this thing, but like, oh wow, that's amazing. Like it couldn't have happened if it was just like one guy doing that or whatever. I like you know, like I like Daredevil Born Again a lot, you know. I don't know if like, I don't think Frank Miller could have made that comic as cool
Yeah.
if he, you know, and like Mazzucchelli, like I don't know if he would ever draw anything like that if not for Frank Miller telling him, you know, oh, I got this great idea, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Like
sense.
yeah, so I don't know, it's kind of weird to me to then take like this thing that was like, oh, that's perfect, let's like put it in this other media, but you know, this won't work here, and this won't work here, and this won't work here, you know. It's kind of like, I feel like if they'd made like that Daredevil TV show, like I enjoyed it, but it's like, oh, that would have been so much better if it was just that comic book.
Yeah.
Someone had just like, oh, we'll just use this as like storyboards for this, you know.
Yeah.
Some things you would have to obviously change here and there, but I don't know. It just seems like adapting stuff, like it's people always get it wrong, you know.
That makes sense.
They always get the wrong idea, you know. It's kind of a rare thing when something like is adapted that actually is okay. Wow, that was fantastic for what it was on its own, you know. Like I love the Little Prince movie, you know,
Yeah.
the musical version of it, you know, Gene Wilder and stuff. And I mean, I don't know how much of that is like nostalgia, and how much of it is just like, wow, that's just like really good musical that is getting by a lot on the charisma of the actors. And you know, it's like corny and stuff, but I mean that original story is pretty corny too.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, I know I have a friend who's like, she read the book as a kid and was like, had no interest in seeing like the film adaptation of it. And I was trying to explain to her, it's like, well, it's different. It's, you know, there's weird things that are kind of the time that I think, you know, are really cool to see and all this stuff. But she just liked the source material so much. She's like, I don't want to watch someone else's idea of what that thing's supposed to be.
That makes sense. So on the topic of Over the Edge, Vinton and I, like after you had told us about Over the Edge, we went home pretty quickly and both watched it together. And I feel like that, you know, when creators share insight into like what has influenced their work, myself as a reader, I can also like, you know, read that book, watch that movie, and it's almost like getting a behind the scenes moment, or like being able to see other media through a creator's eyes. So do you have any recommendation of other books or movies or music that people should check out when they read your work?
Yeah, I mean, I like Taya Matsumoto a lot. Pretty much everything he's done. I just finished reading Sunny not too long ago. It's like his last book series. I mean, I love the work of Mobius and Otomo. You know,
Yeah.
it's like read Akira and Nausicaa by, you know, Miyazaki. There you go.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I like you know, growing up, I read a lot of Marvel comics, like John Buscema, anything he drew, you know, like his run The Avengers, I love that, and all his Conan comics. And Dan and Larry Don't Do That. So it's a book by Dave Cooper that Fantagraphics put out. I think it originally was serialized in Dark Horse Presents, and then Fantagraphics put out a graphic novel of it, and then it's out of print. And I don't know if that's because Dave Cooper doesn't want it in print anymore or what, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, I love that book, and that was like like big inspiration to me to make comics. So was Weasel, his series he did, Weasel. Paul Pope, THB specifically, I really like that a lot. As like one of the guys that made me want to make my own comics. Like Jeff Smith's work. Bone was like a big inspiration to me because before that I hadn't really seen any kind of like independent comic, or I wasn't aware of like an independent comic that had this like big audience. And it was just like, oh wow, this is great. It's not like a superhero thing, and I don't know, it's black and white, and that was sort of like my gateway into like other stuff besides like Marvel comics.
I recently finished your second volume 2 Pop Gun War that was being published in Island, and I really liked the way that you tied in other bits of your work. Of course, we got to see some of the Wrenchies in there, and I even saw that you were tying in some of the stuff that you may be working on in the future from following your Instagram. When you create things, is it always in a shared universe like Stephen King does per se, or is that just something you're doing with your current projects and what you're working on now?
Yeah, it's something I always do. I like the work of Stephen King, and Madeleine L'Engle specifically was like the kind of inspiration for me for that. I think it was like in her book Many Waters, there was like a little family tree of all the connections that all the characters had, from like her sort of like young adult romance stuff and then her science fiction young adult stuff.
Yeah.
And there was like some people that kind of moved in between the two worlds. And I just remember really enjoying the idea that an author could do that. And I know like there's been a bunch of other authors that have done things like that too, but like that for me, she was like the one where it made me like realize like, oh cool, I want to do that. So like it seems like whenever I get an idea for a story, it's like my brain just automatically is like, oh, I can put that in this thing, or I can save that for later for this other thing. It kind of bites me in the ass a little bit, just because I end up compiling so much notes and ideas and little sketches and things, and that it's sort of hard for me to go through and like organize them all. And it's like I don't know how I kind of wish I had this like I don't know, I'm a tortured person about this, like just sort of like, oh, I want to be able just to make a comic like start to finish in one go. I'd just like to be able to be like this. There's a little story in the beginning of that the Adina book that Dark Horse put out, the Mobius.
Yeah.
It's like the collection of all the Adina stories. He talks about that Citron commercial. It was basically like he did an advertisement kind of for Citroen, the car manufacturer, where they just sort of gave it to like employees in the company at first. But there's a story he did about that. But he talked about going over to someone's studio, and he was going to tell them the idea for the story and have them draw it or something. And then he like just started laying it out. And then he said the next thing he knew, he just looked up and there was like all the pages were laying out like in some kind of like trance or something. Like it's like, man, that would be great just to like be able to do that. You could just sit down and be like, I'm gonna do like 20 pages or something, just kind of, and then scan them in and like, okay, I'm done now, I'm the next comic now. But I don't know, I have to go over my pages a lot and kind of like think about it, and like I'm not that smart or gifted. It's just more of like beating my head against the wall repeatedly until something happens. But yeah, like I like all my stories to sort of take and be related to each other. Like the Popcorn War stuff is kind of more of like this urban fantasy world. Sort of like a timeless era. Maybe people have cell phones, maybe they don't. I don't know. I'm not gonna draw people talking on them that much. And the Wrenchies world, like post-apocalyptic magic, it will all hurt type world. That's like sort of like my science fiction fantasy universe, and like there's certain characters that kind of go between the two realms. But I mean, that's pretty much I figure I can tell any kind of story that I want within both of those kind of parameters, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah, I love shared universes like that. It's one of the things I've always loved about Marvel Comics, and Stephen King and Madeline L'Engle are two of my favorite authors. So I really like that you are doing that.
Cool,
Uh,
thanks.
as a writer and an artist, what does character creation look like for you? Do you draw a character and then flesh out who he is, or do you come up with a concept and then put a face to it?
Yeah, I'm usually just like draw a character, and then it's like, hey, I like that guy. I'll just start to draw him a little more, and then like I could put him in this story. I I'm trying to remember when I first started using Hollis. I know it was for one of those Chris Pitzer Project Superior books.
Yeah, I think you had told me before that you used him as a replacement for Batman in a story, but I don't remember if that was the first time that you used him or not.
Yeah, that actually didn't appear until it was like I think the first time I drew him in a sketchbook. Uh, it was at hanging out with Brandon Graham at his apartment, and I don't know, do you know this cartoonist Tom Herpick? You familiar with his work at all?
I don't think so.
He was there. He's really good. He's been working on Adventure Time like pretty much like the whole time it's been on. But he's done 3 comic books: Cusp, Gongwanadon, and White Clay, and they're all amazing. He's my favorite cartoonist, favorite living cartoonist. He doesn't do a lot of work though, but he actually suggested that I name it. I had the drawing of Hollis, and I was like, "Hey, what should I name this guy?" And he was like, "Hollis." And he was like, "It's in this book I'm reading," and I don't even know what book it was. I don't remember now, but yeah. And then I think I drew a comic for that Project Superior book with him in it, and then I replaced him with the Batman on those Batman submission pages.
That's awesome.
And then I put that in one of the Superior Showcase follow-ups to that. But they're both in like my art book too that Ad House also put out.
Well, Hollis is important to both of us. We both got Hollis tattoos.
Yeah.
Yes. And did some cool Hollis costume.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We really connected to the character of Hollis and really felt like it summed up like who we are as comic book consumers, I guess.
Cool. Yeah, that guy's, there's a lot of me in him,
That's awesome.
Those were like the real easy pages to write and draw on the Wrenchies. Like just I don't know, it came real naturally, like his voice or whatever you call it. Seemed like it was like probably the most enjoyable part of the experience working on it.
That's awesome. So, how important is consuming other media to you while you're creating? Do you listen to anything, or do you have like TV on as background noise? Or
Yeah, I never used to be able to do that, but I do that a lot more now. Where it's I'll have like, if I'm kind of in the process of like, I don't know, sort of like letting my mind wander, I'll like to have TV on, and then sometimes I concentrate and just be like, all right, I can't have any noise at all, like like a dog barking or something will like drive me crazy.
Sure. Or a saw.
Yeah.
So do you connect music to your comic creations? And what music do you think best fits your creations?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I felt like when I was working on the Wrenchies, there was a bunch of music I was listening to and really excited about. I don't know, the past couple years, I haven't as much, like as far as like consciously informing my work. And I don't know if there's any, right type of thing. Seems that like if I'm in like a writing, penciling stage, it's better to have stuff that, like kind of metal or like classical music or something where I don't want to, doesn't have like a hook I can sing along with or something,
Right.
That makes sense.
Because it'll kind of like distract me from like, I can't concentrate as much if I'm like tapping my toe to something. But like, yeah, when I'm inking and coloring, I can put on music or listen to podcasts. I guess I mostly just listen to like podcasts and stuff now when I'm doing that kind of thing. I definitely, my work is, I go faster if I have like an audiobook or something that I'm excited about.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that kind of thing, it's like, it kind of makes me want to stay there and just, be at the desk doing that as opposed to like, oh, I'm hungry or I should have more coffee or whatever,
Yeah.
It's easier to get distracted if I'm like, listening to music or something. I know this past year, all the like, like political stuff, I guess, was going on. I was listening to a lot of like Democracy Now and things like that.
Yeah.
Getting really depressed and
yeah.
But
the metal and classical, like that makes a lot of sense. We were talking about Brian Chippendale earlier, and when I listen to Lightning Bolt, I feel kind of relaxed and like able to focus on what's going on around me, or it's like I'm drowning out the outside noise. And I feel like I tell people that, and it doesn't make sense to them, but you saying that it doesn't have a hook you can sing along with, like that kind of makes sense to me, I guess.
yeah, that's I don't know. I feel like I kind of learned that pretty early on.
Yeah.
It's like and it I feel like it's not uncommon either for, I've heard that from other artists and stuff too, that it's like I think Brandon says he listens to rap music when he's inking.
Uh-huh.
But when he's not inking, he'll like listen to classical music or something. I think I remember asking that guy Tom about it, and he says he like when he works, he can't have any noise. I mean, that was like over 10 years ago. I don't know how he works now, but yeah, he said he can't listen to anything.
Wow.
So to wrap up, can you tell us what you're working on now and what you have in store for the future?
Yeah, so I've been kind of doing production stuff on the trade, Popcorn War chain letter, and I'm also been writing and compiling notes and actually started penciling pages, inking a little bit. I haven't gotten anything finished yet, but of this new comic series called Proxima Centauri that it's mostly focused on the main guy from the Wrenchies, Sherwood, but he's like a teenager on board this. It's kind of like a big, like star-sized space station, but it's also like this like dimensional gateway place that. And I've had it in like I actually had it appear in the last Popcorn War story in Island. Like they're running around this big place, but he's like kind of like trapped in this one section on it, and he's like trying to get off of it to find his brother, and it's a little existential kind of thing, science fiction trip. So that's what I'm doing now.
That's exciting.
So where can people find you online?
Mostly like Instagram. I mean, I'm on like all that Facebook and Tumblr and stuff like that, but I'm almost every day I'll go on Instagram as opposed to like the other stuff. I'll do whatever the bare minimum is. Facebook just seems like a weird, thing. I'll usually forward posts that I've done from Instagram to Facebook and then go on there and like some comments or something, like once or twice a week. But then it's just like, oh my God, all this like crazy stuff in my news feed, and to not go on Facebook for a while. So, but yeah, like Instagram, I like that, I guess, the best. And I have a website too. I need to update it more often, but just like FarelDalrymple.com or popcornwar.net, because I lost the URL for popcornwar.com.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that. It's a bummer.
Yeah. Oh well. Polar ice caps are melting. What are you gonna do? Websites.
Well, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
So, time for recommendations.
The comic that I want to recommend is a comic about a small boy in Indiana who gets superpowers. It's not a small boy. It's about a man who gets superpowers from wearing boys' clothes, and it's called Tommy's Comic.
Cory, you can't make up comics to recommend me
Scott.
because I can't read them.
Scott, what's your recommendation?
I
for this
recommend you
week?
don't trust anything
You
Cory
recommend I be
says.
quiet now.
I always struggle with recommendations because I feel like I recommend the same things over and over again. I need to start reading new things, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I was hoping you guys would recommend Doom Patrol and Coady and the Creepies, so I picked something else.
Well, I'll be the one to recommend Coady and the Creepies because I love Liz Prince. I've loved her for a long time, and this was just as much fun as I thought it would be. So I definitely think people should be checking it out.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to put in the show notes that Cory recommended Doom Patrol.
Okay, that's better.
The new issue of Doom Patrol.
My recommendation for this podcast, for this episode, is One Foot in the Grave. It was really good.
I remember when I had my first beer.
I laughed so hard I fell off
of
my
which Cory has
dinosaur.
had none.
So I recommend Grass Kings #1 by Matt Kent. I think the second issue probably is coming out pretty soon.
I'm going
So
to check it out
it
since you
seems
said
really
it has
cool.
a Justified vibe.
Yeah,
I'm into
it's-
anything that has that kind of feel to it.
Yeah. So we'll see what you think. And I specifically, to the two of you, would like you to read God Country and catch up on it because
Okay.
I want people to be reading God Country with me because it's so fun.
I read the second issue. I just haven't read third
Yeah.
issue yet.
I haven't read any. I'll do it for
Do
you.
it for me.
I
For
will.
me. Thanks. And that's going to do it for our show. So if you'd like to get in contact with us, check out our Twitter at @read_brave. And if you'd like to contribute to this show and all the other shows on the Graphomania Podcast Network, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Graphocast, GRAPHOCAST. Check out the websites, readbrave.com and graphocast.com. And if you'd like to talk to me personally, I'm at Flesheater on Twitter.
At Scout Casto. And hey, Vinton, do you know what I did yesterday?
What'd you do?
I contributed to the Graphomania Podcast Network on Patreon for the first time, even though we've been doing this for like a year.
I don't know if
I
you...
I feel
contributed.
like we're invested now,
Yeah,
so I can give up that dollar.
Now, granted, like I contributed to 3 different podcasts, 2 of which we know as well. And as of right now, I'm only giving $1 a month, and I feel so cheap. But I think that it's like for people that live on a really limited budget, $1 a month isn't a lot. But if 30 people can give $1 a month, it adds up.
Yeah,
And I think that
definitely.
it means a lot to people to know that you're behind them, even if it's
Right.
just that $1.
Yeah.
So
I will say, as a creator and as a person that runs a network and has my own Patreon page for it, that just the name alone being in support is just such a big deal, to know that this thing that I put a lot of effort into, that people are actually listening and caring enough to give just $1 a month. It means a lot, and it's a really big deal.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate the dollars even more than I appreciate the listens.
Cory speaks for himself, not the rest of the podcast. And on that note, we will see you in 2 weeks with more comic
One Foot in the
goodness,
Grave.
with more of Cory making up comic books that you'll never be able to find.
he won't. We're going to have a talk tonight.
Goodbye, everybody. This has been a Graphomania production. If you would like to hear more podcasts, go to graphocast.com, GRAPHOCAST.com. Follow us on Twitter at Graphocast and like the Graphomania page on Facebook for news and updates.